Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Russian forces have pushed up to 17 kilometers beyond Ukraine's defensive lines near Pokrovsk, one of their deepest advances in over a year. Using small mobile infantry units, they've reached the outskirts of Dobropillia, threatening supply lines and raising fears of encirclement. While Kyiv insists that these infiltrators can't hold ground, analysts warn that the next 48 hours could be decisive. With reserves rushing in, will this be a short-lived incursion or the start of a larger breakthrough? Well, joining us to consider this question is Ukrainian expert. We're joined by Michael MacKay, who's a Ukrainian expert. He's an independent analyst and a former lecturer at the London School of Economics. Mr. MacKay, welcome to TVP World, and thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so, it's been considered last year or so that there was a stalemate in the battle lines, between Ukraine and Russia. Is this a break to that stalemate?
I think it is slightly a break in that stalemate. The Russians have been mounting a summer offensive and have been attempting to do something like this all along the front. And this area north of Pokrovsk, east of Dobropillia, is where they've had the most success in recent days. But it's preceded by months of the same kind of small mobile unit attacks that have been decimated by primarily drones, with minor gains. And here we see in the last day or so more substantial gains in this one small area. But when we say these small mobile units, I think we should keep in mind that it's very small units, teams of 2 to 4, where the tactic is to rush forward and, in many cases, plant a flag for a video image. And these small forward scouts really are usually eliminated by Ukrainian defenders. But the point is made, there's this video evidence of a presence at a point. And as you say, the farthest point is this area of the front close to the city of Dobropillia, and a very important highway between Dobropillia and Kramatorsk.
Okay,
which is important for the
so let me just clarify something, if I could, please. Now, you say that these small unit attacks have not worked in the past. The Ukrainians have managed to keep them at bay. What happened with this one? Was there a lapse in the Ukrainian communication system? Simply not enough soldiers? What happened?
Yes, there was a lapse. And I think the lapse has to fall to senior command, because it's about how they positioned troops to begin with, and also how they are establishing the Army Corps system, which they've been doing mostly successfully. And it's a tremendous advance following these NATO standards against the Soviet standards followed by the Russian invaders, but not always smoothly. And I think in this one area, there is a lapse. And I think that the blame, if there is any, does go to senior command, which is responsible for deployments of Ukrainian defenders.
Okay, so now reinforcements are being rushed there, including the Azov Brigade, which is very battle-hardened and a group of tough soldiers there. How much difference do you expect this to make to that advance?
I think it will make a substantial difference, because the only way this Russian advance can have a success, if they can have enough soldiers at these forward positions survive drone attacks for Russian reinforcements to be brought up and secure the positions, and more importantly, for artillery to get closer and make it more difficult for Ukrainians to confront them directly. But I think this is a very exposed position that the Russians are, I believe, overextended because they can be attacked from the northwest and east of where they are now. And there are already reports of captures of Russian soldiers, which is a sign of their positions being overrun. But it's early days yet, and I think Ukrainians are doing the right thing and responding to this. And I don't think that this breakthrough in a sector will lead to a strategic breakthrough. I don't see that happening.
So you believe this to be a tactical rather than a strategic breakthrough of the Ukrainian lines, which you expect to be reversed when reinforcements arrive. Is that right?
That's correct. And not only are reinforcements going to attack this breakthrough area, but they're also being sent to Pokrovsk to shore that up. And don't forget that this city has very strong defenses to the south and east, and they've held for about a year with very little changes in the line of contact. This breakthrough is the Russians' attempt to sweep to the north of this entire city, but I don't think they have the reach for an encirclement. Not even an encirclement by artillery control, for example. Certainly not by territory.
Understood. Now, one of the concerns, you mentioned Pokrovsk, one of the concerns is that this is it's a major supply hub, and control of that city is going to choke supplies to the Ukrainian military. How well is it defended? You mentioned its positioning at the moment, but it is under threat.
Yes, it is. But there are very good natural defenses there, which the Ukrainians have been able to use. And what the Russians are trying to do is to break into open country behind the city. But it isn't so much that this is a hub for supply. If you look at the map, it's actually in the forward position. Supplies go to it, where it is a bulwark of the defense. So if the Ukrainians do decide on a withdrawal, they would do what we saw a year ago at Bakhmut. They would simply withdraw to the next city over, which was Chasiv Yar, where there's fighting still going on a year later. So it would be bad. A good defensive position would be lost. But don't forget the Ukrainians have been building defenses 20 and 30 kilometers back. That's actually a part of the reason why the Russians made this rush, is to try to reach the defenses that are farthest to the rear before they're more established.
Okay. Now I wanted to talk.
Engineers are doing.
I want to talk briefly about the tactics used here. You talk about small 2 to 4 man teams, which is very unusual. Why are the Russians taking this approach? There's no armor supporting them, more like a special forces unit or a series of special forces units carrying this attack out. Why is that? Why has Russia chosen to do it this way?
Because it's an evolution of the so-called meat wave attacks. A year ago, we were seeing the tactics where large numbers, others 20, 30, 40, would rush forward. But the thing is, Ukrainians could use artillery, especially with cluster munitions, and inflict tremendous damage on this. When you send a small team of 2 to 4, they just rush forward, and the economics of warfare is that the Ukrainians are targeting individual soldiers with these kamikaze drones, these loiters, generally smashing into them with the smaller ones, and soldiers are wounded, dropping grenades on them. In other words, it's 1-to-1, 2-to-1 of drones to Russian soldiers. So the Russian tactic is to try to rush forward, and if 1 out of 4 survives, to hold a position, the idea is that eventually Russian reinforcements can come up to that point.
Understood. Now, I want to zoom out a little bit. Belarus and Russia are holding joint military exercises called the Zapad drills in Belarus. Do you think that those exercises could actually convert into a threatening posture for Ukraine, or even perhaps the Baltic states?
They could. And certainly Russian propaganda will want to play up that possibility. I think we'll see Russian propaganda present these exercises, talk about the capabilities to strike northern Ukraine, to strike Poland, to strike the Baltic countries, and then talk about the United States and its reluctance to commit to supporting its NATO allies. So I see this mostly as a propaganda campaign backed with these images of these large exercises. However, at this point, I see it very unlikely they'll be used even for an incursion into the north of Ukraine.
Okay, I'd like to, in the last minute and a half or so that we have, I'd like to get your view on the upcoming meeting between Trump and Putin. The U.S. press secretary has said that basically this is going to be a listening exercise for Trump. He wants to hear what Putin's terms are, but we know what they are. I mean, Witkoff has been informed of them, although he misunderstood them apparently. But it's not the first time that Putin has actually made his position clear. What do you think? What do you think they're going to talk about? What's on the agenda?
I think it will be a listening exercise in that Putin will lecture Trump. And so the U.S. government is in chaos on this, and the Russians have already achieved a tremendous victory by getting the threat of sanctions removed and attention shifted from the ceasefire, which they're supposed to observe, onto these insane territorial demands, which they're connecting to some peace deal in the mind of Trump. So the Russians have already secured an enormous propaganda victory over the Americans, not over the Ukrainians, and they'll simply seek to amplify that at the meeting with images and sound bites. So I think the world should hope that that's the worst it is, because it could be so much worse than that it simply amplifies this propaganda victory that Russia has already achieved.
Understand. Well, Michael MacKay, thank you very much for your analysis. We'll be watching very carefully to see what happens on Friday. We hope to see you again soon. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye now. That brings us to the end of this episode of World Talks. Don't go away. As always, lots more coming up. Goodbye.